The quantum field is made up of pure potential that is expressed as waveforms. Our consciousness acts as an antenna that translates these waveforms into what's known as interference patterns, and then once more into particles that make up everything in the physical world, including ourselves. But providing the raw materials for reality is not where the magic of waveforms stop. They also shape an infinite number of past, present, and futures. We call these past, present, and futures a timeline. For anyone who is familiar with the Mandela effect, that is one of the most common examples of memories being carried over from a prior timeline we were on into the timeline we currently occupy. We are shifting timelines more often than not, and many anomalies are left as the artifacts of this. With the quantum field consisting of limitless potential, the way it even knows what timeline to activate and to materialize is through a feedback loop. In fact, when you're operating at this level of reality, it's so ambiguous you will need a feedback loop to guide the output. And the guiding force that tells this feedback loop what to produce is the choices we make. These probabilities are like vibrational momentum building up, much like an ocean wave. These probabilities continue to drop off and further narrow the more we focus our choices until probability turns into actuality, which is what has manifested. And this process happens every single moment. So let's say we choose to venture down a path of awakening our consciousness. The quantum field organizes a new trajectory with the full unfoldment of that choice, containing all possibilities and all probabilities. So the more conscious we become, the more we are reinforcing the timelines that reflect that choice. What this does is establish a feedback loop between us and all of the potential future versions of ourselves that we are aligning with. And through this feedback loop, the potential future versions of ourselves send us the resources we would require in order to actualize them. This is also reflected in the ancient wisdom, you cannot travel the path until you become the path itself. Your choices now are already activating potential future versions of yourself. There are multiple versions of reality on Earth, and we are constantly aligning, otherwise known as jumping, timelines, whether we are conscious of it or not. So we can look at timelines a few different ways. We have personal timelines and collective timelines. There are events constantly happening that continuously alter these timelines again and again. Our personal timelines consist of the past and present choices we make every day. They are impacted by our trauma, socioeconomic status, karmic imprints, desires, and belief systems. Depending on how much of our free will we are using, we either make predictable and established choices that we hope lead to a future we have envisioned, or we can implement more chance and uncertainty that would open up the timelines containing entirely different potential futures. If we are content on our current trajectory, the less likely we are to make radical choices that would lead to radical changes in direction. So it's a matter of personal preference. However, this is where fate comes into play. There is a degree of fate that is at work in our life, just as there is a degree of free will. Fate is the lessons we came into this life wanting to experience, and free will is the journey of how those lessons are lived. Fate can and does intervene when it feels we are not as proactive as we could be. But what is not guaranteed is how well our outcomes come into fruition. That is all left up to our actions, discernment, and willpower. Now let's focus on the collective timelines. Imagine that there is already multiple versions of reality on Earth, and in the past of one of these versions of reality, World War I never happened. That would significantly alter the future of that reality, not to mention the ripples that would create. Now apply the same concept to any event that was devastating and could be traumatizing to our collective psyche. And you could see that although there is an infinite number of potential timelines, that it's less likely we'd be able to access the ones that are prosperous and optimal if our collective psyche is continuously being directed into timelines that are traumatizing and disempowering. As I mentioned, we shift collective timelines frequently, but the wider the jump from our current reality, the more awareness is required to do so. What this means is if we want to experience an optimal and prosperous timeline, we would need to stop feeding the official narratives that limit our true potential and start taking conscious actions that reflect the timeline we want to call forth. So the main way that revelation of the method is carried out is through something known as predictive programming. Predictive programming is when we are already infused in the collective consciousness with visuals and images of an event before it's about to play out. And then we're seeing it in one arena in one way, and then in similar ways across different avenues of media. So they might not always be able to make a clear connection because they'll be similar but not identical events. It's all to get the essence of this imagery into our collective consciousness. And this is why reality looks so set in stone. It looks like it's on a specific railroad track, if you will. It's because we're so used to this imagery that we're exposed to by the time that something happens that it's like we've been prepared and we've been conditioned for it. And it's because we have. We've already seen these things. And so naturally we see them entered into our reality, and we've already accepted it as reality itself. We even scoff at different things that we can't conceive of because it hasn't entered our field yet through predictive programming. So paradigm blindness is also a part of a very heavily conditioned mind. The other avenue for revelation of the method is through repetition. Repetition plays a very strong role in this because we need to have things so normalized to us that by the time we're in that timeline or that event happens, we've already been subconsciously aware of it and expecting it. And that's done through repetition. This is why you see in the media certain phrases said over and over and over again, and certain sound bites taken and sensationalized. They need to have our minds strongly prepared for these experiences and events, and that's done through repetition and through strong imagery. This is how they bypass our conscious mind and get consent through our subconscious. And our subconscious is really the one who's running the show, because the subconscious mind is tenfold more powerful than the conscious mind. This has already been proven, and some people have even calibrated the subconscious mind to be 1 trillion times more stronger than the conscious mind. So they reveal to us what they are going to do, and then they enhance that with the imagery and the sensational speech and all of the repetition of these things going on within our collective world stage. By the time revelation of the method has been drawn into manifestation, we are experiencing what's known the state of shock. Now, shock can be used for very beneficial and positive means, and it can be used for very detrimental and negative means. The positive means are mainly used in esotericism and mysticism as ways to activate higher consciousness and deeper awareness. The ways that shock is instrumentally used, this is through a lot of fear-based reporting and fear-based media, anything to sensationalize us to get us stunned and in the state of shock. Because once we're in that state in a negatively prepared way, what they're able to do now is to bypass our conscious mind and to go straight into the motherboard of our experience, which is the subconscious. So they're preparing the subconscious every step of the way. They're doing it first through telling us what they're about to do. They can do this even through comedical means. It doesn't have to be straight up telling us what they're going to do. It can be done any manner of way. The rules here that we're working with are very, very thin, because they have to honor our free will, but to like the bare minimum of that degree. So it can even be bypassed as a joke. It can come off as something that's said in an article, and at least it was thrown out there into the ether, into the worldwide collective memory. So as long as they're able to say it, it's not up to them if we believe it or not. It's not up to them for anything else, because their part of the responsibility was already upheld. They did the revelation, they revealed to us the method, and then their hands are clean from a universal perspective and from a karmic perspective. That's how they bypass karmic means. And so this is how tricky of a situation and challenging of a dilemma humanity is in, because we're talking about free will, but free will to the ultimate max, meaning that anything in between there, it can be curved so much that it can almost look like it's completely revoked. And so this is why we have to become conscious and aware of all of this. It's because until we understand just how important our free will is, we're going to continue to, by default, submit our own consent to these agendas. Knowing that there's an objective reality that this is adhering to tells us the importance of being able to become aware of it and align with it, because it's being used against us. And that objectivity in this case is that energy flows where attention goes. So the best way that I can illustrate revelation of the method is that scene from Hocus Pocus where the witches say, "I put a spell on you," and then the crowd just laughs. Well, them saying, "I put a spell on you," is revealing the method that they're about to do in order for the spell to even be accepted and then therefore cast. And that's what's happening on Earth every single day. We're just essentially laughing at everything that's being told to us because it's not being done in like a super serious way. But let's be honest, at this point, we could just hear it and a person could be like, "No, you guys, seriously, I'm really saying this." And people would still at this point just like not even care. They're so numbed out from their own free will and from their own consciousness. And that's why the most important way to counteract revelation of the method is by first becoming aware that this is even being done in the first place. Because awareness alone is going to raise our frequency enough to start building this guard, this defense shield against it. The second step in counteracting revelation of the method is through healing, because this is all able to be done because we're in a traumatized state of being. And when we're in a traumatized state of being, we're in a schism. We're in fragmentation. So we need to understand the importance of healing and embarking on a healing journey through this in order to bring the internal unity and bring the internal cohesion that's required in order for us to raise our frequency above the level of reality that is using our mass consciousness to focus on specific timelines and therefore create them. This is the hidden reason why shadow work is so important. It's because there's a law in this universe that is not well known, and that is whatever you are not aware of can be used against you in the court of this universe. And shadow work is the medium that we use in order to become aware of how we are operating unbeknownst to ourselves. Because becoming aware of something means that it can no longer be used against you, which is why there's a vested interest for humanity to stay emotionally stunted. The third step in counteracting revelation of the method is by stepping into our sovereignty and declaring otherwise. So declarations are very important when it comes to this, because declarations set our authority and speak into reality through the vibration of our voice what we will be experiencing instead. And this is done also through our conscious actions. So stepping into our sovereignty in all areas and dimensions of our being. Declaring what you will experience and what you will not experience is very important in this. And so there's a popular declaration known as "I do not consent." But the problem with "I do not consent" is when we voice it, but our actions still show that we are in consent. This is no different than like if we're riding a bicycle, but then we're declaring, "I am not riding a bicycle." Well, at that point, it doesn't really matter what we're saying because the actions we're taking are that of riding a bicycle. And so a lot of the times when we're saying, "I do not consent," what we're actually doing is still with our actions, believing in certain controlled opposition dynamics or believing in certain paradigms or programming that are still at that same level of reality. And so in that way, we're still giving our energy, our focus, our beliefs, our attention to it, just probably another aspect or another polarity of that same experience. And so because of that, our actions are not congruent. They're not actually reflecting what we're saying. And in that case, that's when declarations are futile. They're energetically weak. They don't mean anything at that point because our actions are overpowering them. But when we're able to say something and declare it and our actions are in alignment and congruent with that, that is when we're stepping into our sovereignty. Because in sovereignty, we're not in the mode of hypocrisy. We're not divided. We're in eternal unity. Our words match our actions, match our beliefs, match our feelings. Timelines are a dime a dozen. And so when we're coordinating with them, giving our fear into all of these different events and different things that we're worried are going to come and be drawn into manifestation, and specifically certain portals being opened on certain days, all of these things are actually feeding those events, and they needed to be entered and introduced into our collective consciousness in order for these portals to be open. And so what's important for us to know is that negative timelines don't need to be open. So if revealing of the method has taught us anything, it's actually by teaching us the power of our own free will and the great lengths and elaborate settings that have to occur in order for us to get our free will extracted and sign off and consent to versions of reality that are not for humanity's well-being.
Thanks for watching. And if you get value out of this video in any way, hit that like button for me. Share it with a friend. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe. Otherwise, keep an eye on it. Stay blessed.